And, Paul, you've got some football questions. I think I've got some answers. Let's roll.
All righty. The Denver Broncos fired first-year head coach Nathaniel Hackett after a 4-11 start to their season. That makes 3 coaches fired so far. Who do you think's the next to go?
It's no secret I'm not a big fan of Cliff Kingsbury. In fact, I'm not a fan at all of Cliff Kingsbury. I think he's in over his head. I thought he was in over his head in college. Couldn't believe that he was going to get a big gig in the college game before the NFL came calling. I thought that was kind of crazy. It hasn't worked out. Didn't work out with Kyler Murray. They butt heads. It's clearly not working out there. Now Murray's hurt. The team has got plenty of superstar power on that team. They've got a couple of really good receivers. They have one of the best receivers in the NFL in DeAndre Hopkins. They've got a good running back. They've got star players at every level of the defense, it seems, but they can't win games. He's got to go. Cliff Kingsbury is my man to go. I would have said Josh McDaniels with the Raiders, but the fact that he hasn't been fired and he just decided to bench Derek Carr, and now they've decided that they're going to let Derek Carr go away, stay away from the team, tells me that he's coming back. So I would say it's Cliff Kingsbury.
So speaking of the Raiders and the Derek Carr situation, the Raiders obviously announced they're benching Derek Carr the remainder of the season and seemingly paving the way to move on for him this offseason. Where do you think he ends up playing next year?
My gut tells me that the Indianapolis Colts will come calling. And I'm not sure which benefits the Raiders more, if they just cut him or if they try to trade him. I don't know what kind of trade value he's got. And if you trade him, you're going to have to eat more of that signing bonus, I believe, or eat more salary. Whatever the case is, I think the cap hit changes if it's a trade versus cut. If he's cut, from my understanding, if he's cut, it's only like a $5 million cap hit. It's really easy to take. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, he gets cut. Indianapolis would sign him because that's what Indianapolis does. I mean, they carry on a steady stream of veteran quarterbacks that are left in the wake of Andrew Luck's retirement. They just can't figure it out. They go Phillip Rivers.
To be fair, though, this year, Gator, they actually have a chance to draft a quarterback high in the draft.
No, yes, they do have a chance to draft a quarterback high in this draft. But they get impatient there in Indianapolis. They want to make sure that they can continue to hit the ground. They've got a good defense. They've got some pieces on offense. If you brought a veteran quarterback in there, this is their thinking, not mine. Their thinking is, we got this. Plus, you may not be sold on the quarterbacks that are there. If you're sold on Will Levis, then go ahead and do it. I personally would probably try to find a route to get a different quarterback, and I would use the top pick that they have, which is going to be a top 5 pick likely. I'd use it on an offensive lineman because they are desperate for offensive line help. But that's me.
So J.J. Watt announced he's retiring after the season is over. Is he a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I don't think there's any question that J.J. Watt is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I know he missed a lot of time in his NFL career with injuries, but when he played full seasons, he was the best player on the field. He always was. He spent 10 years in Houston. 10 years with the Houston franchise. It's a terrible franchise, and yet he was great enough to stand out despite the fact that he played on that terrible, terrible team. Defensive player of the year multiple times. That's huge. I believe he was the only player to record multiple 20-sack seasons. That's amazing. He's one of, I think, 4 or 5 players with over 100 sacks in his NFL career and 5 touchdowns. He's caught 3 passes in his NFL career. All 3 were for touchdowns. He's returned a couple of fumbles for touchdowns. And, oh, by the way, he's still productive. He's got 9.5 sacks this year with Arizona, also a forced fumble and a fumble recovery. The guy is still making plays out there. So, yeah, first ballot Hall of Famer? I think so.
So the Texans left tackle Laremy Tunsil told ESPN he wants to be the highest paid tackle in the NFL. So if you're the Texans, do you pay him north of $23 million per year?
If I'm the Texans, I do not, because the Texans have so many holes to fill. They're better suited just letting them go and then dispersing that money where it matters. What they need to do is build the team. Now, I firmly believe in building a team through the offensive line and building it through the trenches. But I'm not going to build it with my first building block and making it the highest paid offensive tackle in the game. That makes no sense at all for Houston to go ahead and do that. Now watch Houston do it because Houston is a nonsensical franchise, as I mentioned earlier. However, that's not going to stop some other team from wanting to put that kind of money towards him, particularly a team that feels like they're just an offensive tackle away from winning the Super Bowl. I mean, there are plenty of teams out there that have really good quarterbacks that could use extra protection that might look at Laremy Tunsil. But as far as Houston and what they should be doing, I sure as hell would not fork over $23 million a year if I'm a bad franchise and tie it down to an offensive tackle. That doesn't make sense.
So apparently Tua suffered another concussion against the Packers this past Sunday and will be out this week when the Dolphins face the Patriots. Should the team just sit him for the last 2 games of the regular season as a precaution if they do make the playoffs?
Well, there's no question he shouldn't play this week. His 3rd concussion of the year that's been documented. This is a point now where he's getting concussed from a normal tackle. His head hit the ground after he was tackled. Maybe he needs to learn more about protecting himself and doing more neck strength or whatever, and tucking your chin into your chest if you're going to go down so that your head doesn't hit the ground with force. But all that being said, yeah, I would sit him out. I mean, I think Tua Tagovailoa is a very good quarterback. I think that the Achilles heel for him is that he gets hurt. That's a problem. And fortunately for Miami, they have a capable backup in Teddy Bridgewater. He's good. He's not great. He's good enough to keep the team afloat. Now, they've got outstanding receivers there. They've got a good defense. They can win with Teddy Bridgewater here. So if I were Miami, I probably would let Tua sit out the next couple of weeks, get him as healthy as you can, and then revisit it if you make the playoffs. Revisit it for the playoff run if you need to have him there. But it may be a full off season of Tua not playing football. And frankly, he's a different kind of guy. He may do some introspective thinking here and just decide that he's not going to play football anymore. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, plenty of other players have already made that decision because of concussions.
So the 49ers are on an 8-game winning streak and riding the hot hand of rookie quarterback Brock Purdy. Can Purdy keep this up and lead them on a deep playoff run?
He's been interesting. 2 touchdowns every time he plays, he throws for. That's surprising to me that he's been able to keep that up. And yet you start to look at it. It's San Francisco. It's just the model that they have. I don't know how good he is, but they were able to keep their offense going years ago when they went through like 3 quarterbacks in 4 weeks, and every quarterback they brought in was just fine. Like C.J. Beathard was part of that group. I forget who the other quarterbacks were there.
I think Nick Mullins was one of them.
Yeah, maybe. They were able to get things done, and it didn't matter if it was, Jimmy Garoppolo this year, and they wanted to get it done with Trey Lance because they spent the high resource of a draft pick to get it, and that's who they were going to go with. But he got hurt, and here comes Brock Purdy getting it done. Brock Purdy learned the number one lesson to learn as an NFL quarterback: make friends with your tight end. And when your tight end is George Kittle, one of the 1 or 2 best tight ends in the NFL, him or Kelsey, take your pick. I think you've chosen wisely. George Kittle's a different kind of player. You find him on the field, good things happen. The other good thing that happened to Brock Purdy in San Francisco was that San Francisco was able to trade for Christian McCaffrey. That helps things out. It'd be better if they can get Deebo Samuel back, but that's a whole other story.
So the NFL Coach of the Year award is always a hotly debated topic because people either think one of 2 ways. Either it goes to the guy who coaches the team with the best record, or it goes to the guy whose team has the most surprising record. Where do you stand on that debate?
I'm more of, I guess I lean towards the surprising record to see the big growth from one year to the next. So if I'm looking at this year, I'm certainly looking at Detroit. I'm looking at Jacksonville with the coaches there, as opposed to just, chalking it up to what's happened. But this year, with some team that's always at the top, this year's a little different. Philadelphia and Nick Sirianni, what he has done there, I think is quite impressive. The only person I know that thought Philadelphia was going to be good this year was Kang. And the only reason he latched onto him is because every year he picks a long shot that's going to win the title. We did that to start the season. That was his team. The Giants were Doug's team. So it's worked out for Kang. And, the fact that they've got that thing humming along with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, and now Jalen Hurts looks like he's an MVP candidate, even though he got hurt. I'm amazed with what they've done. I think it's different every year. I think I got to be objective about it, but I would lean towards a team that just was a surprise and maybe had a big, go from 3 wins to 8 wins. But you can't ignore what they've done in Philadelphia.
I also think that Jacksonville is a very scary team because I think Doug Peterson fixed Trevor Lawrence.
Well, he's certainly a better option than Urban Meyer to coach him. And Doug Peterson has a history and track record of working with quarterbacks and working with big quarterbacks like he did with Carson Wentz. And they did get to the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I think it's a good fit for him there. And with Jacksonville at the top of their division right now, that's going to get a lot of noise. That's why I mentioned, either you look at him, you look at what Dan Campbell's done in Detroit. And I think both teams are dangerous if they get to the playoffs. Both teams, nobody wants to play either of those teams. But I'll still say this year, I think it's going to go to Sirianni.